Sometimes life changes in the space of a single breath. One moment, you're just another face in a quiet town, fixing what's broken and trying to keep your own heart from falling apart. The next, you're kneeling in the middle of a rain-soaked highway, holding a stranger's trembling hand while smoke rises from twisted metal. That night, Ethan Walker didn't know her name. He didn't know she was one of the richest women in New York. All he knew was that she was fighting to breathe, and that somehow, without understanding why, he couldn't let go. Ethan Walker had lived in Havenbrook, Vermont, his whole life. The little town was wrapped in quiet hills and winding roads, a place where everybody knew your name and sometimes your business. 2 years ago, Rachel, his wife, his anchor, was taken by a sudden illness, leaving him alone to raise their 8-year-old son, Caleb. Since then, his days had blurred into work at his modest garage, school pickups, and the quiet ache of a house too still at night. On a late autumn morning, he was driving his old pickup down Highway 19, when the sound of shattering glass and metal tearing against asphalt broke through the calm. He slammed the brakes, heart pounding, eyes locking onto a silver luxury sedan that had spun off the road and into a ditch. Steam curled up from the hood. The driver's side was caved in. Without thinking, Ethan jumped from his truck and sprinted toward the wreck. The cold air stung his lungs, and the smell of burnt rubber mixed with gasoline filled his nose. Through the cracked windshield, he saw her, a woman in her 30s, blood tracing a line down her temple, her breathing shallow. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, tugging at the twisted door handle. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion swimming in them. I can't move," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan wedged his shoulder against the frame and pulled until the metal groaned. With one final wrench, the door gave way. "You're going to be okay," he said, sliding his arms under her. She was lighter than he expected, and as he carried her toward his truck, he could feel her shivering. An ambulance wailed in the distance. He set her gently on the grass, pulling off his jacket and draping it over her shoulders. She clutched something in her hand, a worn wooden pencil, the paint faded, edges nicked as if it had been used 100 times. "You hold on to that," he told her softly, though he didn't understand why it mattered to her so much. She tried to speak, but the paramedics arrived, moving quickly to stabilize her and load her into the ambulance. In the chaos, their eyes met one last time. There was something there, a flicker of gratitude, maybe even recognition, but then the doors closed and she was gone. Ethan stood by the side of the road, rain dripping from his hair, jacket gone, heart still racing. He didn't know her name, didn't know why she'd been driving alone on Highway 19, but for days afterward, he couldn't stop seeing her face. That night, over dinner, Caleb asked, "Dad, what happened on the road today? You're quieter than usual." "Just helped someone who needed it," Ethan said, ruffling his son's hair. "That's all." He didn't mention the way her pale hand had gripped his so tightly, or how the sight of her had left a strange, unshakable mark on him. The next morning, he checked the local news for any updates. There was nothing, no names, no follow-ups, as if she had vanished entirely. For weeks, he wondered if she was okay. Then life in Havenbrook settled back into its slow rhythm. Winter came, blanketing the hills in white. The garage was cold, the days short. Caleb's art projects began taking over the kitchen table, pencils and paper scattered everywhere. One afternoon, Ethan noticed a particular pencil in his son's hand, the same worn wooden one the woman had been holding that day. "Where'd you get that?" he asked, his chest tightening. Caleb smiled. "It was in your jacket pocket. I like it. It draws better than the others." Ethan didn't have an answer. He just nodded and watched as Caleb bent over his sketch pad, the faint scratching of the pencil filling the quiet kitchen. He didn't know it yet, but that small piece of wood was the first thread in a story that would pull all three of their lives together, one that would test every boundary he thought he had, and every truth he thought he knew. 2 years passed. The pencil stayed in Caleb's collection, worn further with every sketch and doodle. Ethan never spoke of the accident again, though sometimes, in the quiet of the garage, his thoughts drifted back to the woman on Highway 19. Her face had blurred at the edges in his memory, but the feeling he'd had that day, the strange pull, the need to protect her, never fully left him. Havenbrook's spring arrived late that year, as if the snow was reluctant to give up its hold. Ethan was finishing a brake job when the bell above the garage door chimed. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked up. A woman stood there, mid-30s, simple jeans, a pale blue cardigan, dark hair pulled back loosely. She carried herself in a way that didn't match her clothes. There was a certain grace, a stillness that made her seem out of place in a mechanic's shop. Hi, she said, her voice warm but careful. My name's Anna Miller. I think my car needs some work. Ethan nodded. What's it doing? She smiled faintly, almost apologetic. It's making a sound I don't think it's supposed to make. They walked out to the parking lot, where a dusty sedan sat crooked in a space. He popped the hood, listening as she described the noise. While he worked, he noticed her gaze drifting, not to the tools, but to the sketch taped on the wall above his workbench. Caleb had drawn it last week, a charcoal landscape of the Vermont hills. That's beautiful, she said softly. My boy's got a knack for it, Ethan replied, a touch of pride in his voice. Keeps the kitchen table covered in drawings. Her eyes softened. He must have a good teacher. I just keep him in pencils, Ethan said, closing the hood. Anna lingered after he explained the repair. She asked about Havenbrook, about the school, about the best place to get coffee. There was an ease to her questions, but something in her posture was guarded, like she was testing the ground before stepping forward. Later that afternoon, she returned with 2 cups from the local cafe. One for him, one for Caleb. For the artist, she said, handing the second cup, which was filled with hot chocolate, to the boy. Caleb's eyes lit up. They talked for a few minutes, and in that short span, Ethan noticed how quickly Caleb warmed to her. She didn't talk down to him. She asked about his drawings, his favorite colors, the things he wanted to make next. She listened, really listened. That evening, Caleb told Ethan, Anna's nice. She looks at my pictures like Mom used to. The words caught in Ethan's chest. He didn't want to read too much into it. She was a customer, that's all. But over the next few weeks, Anna kept finding reasons to stop by, checking on her car, bringing muffins for the garage, asking Caleb if she could see his latest sketch. One rainy Saturday, she sat at the kitchen table with them, watching Caleb draw. Ethan noticed her eyes flick toward the pencil in Caleb's hand, the old wooden one. For a second, she froze. But when he looked at her, she smiled and said nothing. She never mentioned the accident. And Ethan, though something about her seemed familiar, couldn't quite place her. The memory was like a word on the tip of his tongue, there, but not coming. What he didn't know was that Anna Miller wasn't her real name, and she hadn't chosen Havenbrook at random. For 2 years, Victoria Hayes had lived in the shadows of her own life, running from boardrooms, cameras, and the suffocating weight of her family's art empire. She had built this new name carefully, like a fragile shelter, and stepping into Ethan's world was the first time she'd felt steady in a long while. She also hadn't expected to see the pencil again, or to find it in the hands of a boy who looked at the world the way she once did, before everything became complicated. By the end of summer, Anna had become a fixture in their lives. She never pushed her way in. It was more like she quietly filled the empty spaces, the ones Ethan hadn't even realized were there. She'd stop by the garage with lunch when work was hectic. She'd take Caleb to the park when Ethan had to finish a job late. She seemed to know when to talk and when to let silence do the work. One Saturday morning, Ethan found her and Caleb sitting in the backyard, a sketchpad spread open between them. Caleb was working on a portrait of an old maple tree, his brow furrowed in concentration. Anna sat beside him, offering gentle suggestions, never touching the pencil, just pointing at the shadows he'd missed. "You've got an artist's eye," she said to him. Caleb grinned. "Dad says I get it from Mom." Something flickered across Anna's face, softness, maybe longing, but she just nodded. "Then you're carrying something special." Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them. He'd always been protective of his son's heart. Since Rachel died, letting someone new get close wasn't easy. But Anna was different. She didn't make promises. She didn't treat Caleb like a kid she had to entertain. She treated him like a person. One evening, over dinner, Caleb asked, "Can Anna come with us to the harvest fair next week?" Ethan hesitated. The fair had always been their thing, a father-son tradition since Caleb was 4. But when he saw the hope in his son's eyes, he said, "Sure." The fair was crowded that Saturday, the air thick with the scent of fried dough and cider. Caleb darted from one game booth to another, Anna following with easy laughter. Ethan found himself watching her more than the rides. She looked at home here, even with the noise and bustle, her hair catching the golden light of late afternoon. They ended up at a local art tent, where handmade paintings and sketches lined the walls. Caleb wandered between the displays, studying the brushstrokes. Anna lingered near a small charcoal drawing of a Vermont hillside, her gaze intent. "You like it?" Ethan asked, stepping beside her. "It's peaceful," she said, her voice low. "It reminds me of a place I once wished I could stay." For a moment, something in her expression shifted, like the weight of another life pressing against the edges of the one she'd built here. Ethan didn't press her, but later, when they walked home under the street lamps, he found himself wanting to know more. That night, after Caleb was in bed, Anna helped Ethan clean up the kitchen. He caught her staring out the window, her face unreadable. "You've been in Havenbrook a while now," he said. "You planning to stay?" She smiled faintly. "I don't know. Sometimes it's easier to stay somewhere you're not expected to be anyone." Ethan didn't quite understand, but he recognized the tone. It was the sound of someone carrying more than they said out loud. What neither of them realized was that time was working against them. Secrets don't stay buried forever, not in small towns, and not when the past has a way of finding you. Autumn settled over Havenbrook in a blaze of gold and rust. Mornings were crisp, evenings carried the scent of wood smoke, and the hills glowed in the soft light of shorter days. Life had slipped into a comfortable rhythm: garage work, Caleb's school projects, and Anna's steady presence that had become as natural as the turning of the leaves. But even rhythms can falter. One evening, Ethan noticed her in the garage after hours. She wasn't there for her car. She was leaning over Caleb's latest sketch, her fingertips brushing the worn wooden pencil like it was a fragile relic. Her eyes shimmered, and she didn't notice him until he spoke. "You okay?" She startled, then smiled quickly. "Just remembering something." "From before you came here?" he asked. Her gaze met his, but only for a second. "Something like that." The conversation ended there, but the image stayed with him. A week later, Anna canceled their Saturday dinner at the last minute, saying she needed to take care of something in town. Havenbrook was small. There wasn't much you could take care of without someone noticing. Ethan didn't think much of it until he ran into Mrs. Green from the post office, who mentioned she'd seen Anna near the train station, talking to a man in a sharp suit. Ethan told himself it was none of his business. She was free to have her own life. But something about the image, a man who looked like he belonged in a city skyline, not under Vermont's falling leaves, made his chest tighten. Later that night, when Anna stopped by to drop off a sketchbook Caleb had left at her place, Ethan asked, "Everything okay today?" "Yes," she said, the word too quick, her smile just a little too practiced. The truth was, Anna's carefully built world in Havenbrook was beginning to strain. That man at the train station was her family's attorney, sent to convince her to come back to New York. To the board meetings. To the headlines. To the life she had walked away from. She had refused, again, but every visit, every message reminded her that her sanctuary here was temporary. And Ethan was starting to matter in ways she hadn't prepared for. So was Caleb. One Sunday, they drove out to the lake for the last warm day before the chill would settle in. Caleb skipped stones while Anna sat on the dock, her legs dangling above the water. Ethan joined her, the boards creaking under his weight. "You ever get tired of running a garage?" she asked. "Some days. But it's mine. And I can pick Caleb up from school whenever I want. That's worth a lot." She nodded, looking out at the rippling water. "It's strange, how freedom doesn't always look the way you think it will." Ethan studied her profile, the calm surface, and whatever storm she was holding beneath it. He wanted to ask what she meant. He wanted to ask who she really was. But he didn't. Not yet. Because sometimes you can feel the truth coming, and you know when it does, it's going to change everything. The first snow of the season came early, dusting Havenbrook in white and turning the streets into something out of a postcard. Caleb was thrilled. He built a lopsided snowman in the yard, calling for Anna to help with the scarf. She came out laughing, cheeks pink from the cold, but Ethan noticed she was distracted. Her phone buzzed twice in her coat pocket before she finally slipped it out. The moment she saw the screen, her smile vanished. She excused herself and went inside. That night, Ethan found her on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the falling snow. Her phone lay face down on the table. "You've been somewhere else all day," he said quietly. She didn't look at him. "I've been trying to hold two lives together, Ethan. And I think they're about to collide." Before he could respond, headlights cut through the driveway. A sleek black SUV pulled up, utterly out of place in the small Vermont town. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a cashmere coat and polished shoes that had never met a gravel road. "Victoria," he said sharply, striding toward the porch. Ethan's head turned. "Victoria?" Anna Victoria closed her eyes briefly, then stood. "Ethan, this is James Carter. He's my family's attorney." The pieces began falling into place. The man at the train station, the way she avoided talking about her past, the moments when her eyes carried a weight she never explained. James ignored Ethan entirely. The board is restless. Your absence has gone on long enough. The press is asking questions we can't keep dodging. You've made your point. Now it's time to come back to New York. Ethan's voice was low but edged with steel. What's going on here? Victoria's shoulders sank. I'm not who you think I am. I'm not Anna Miller. My real name is Victoria Hayes. I'm the CEO of Hayes International. Ethan stared at her. The tech company? He stopped, the realization hitting hard. You've been lying to us this whole time. I didn't mean to, she said, her voice cracking. When I came here, I just wanted a place where no one looked at me like a headline. I wanted to breathe. And then I met you and Caleb, and it stopped being about me hiding. It became about not wanting to lose this. Caleb appeared at the doorway, eyes wide. Dad? What's going on? Ethan's chest tightened. Go back inside, buddy. We'll talk later. The attorney's tone turned impatient. Victoria, we're leaving tonight. Her gaze flicked between Ethan and Caleb, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I'm not ready to go. Ethan shook his head, hurt lacing his words. You've been here for months, and you couldn't trust me with the truth? I was afraid if I told you, you'd treat me differently. Or worse, you'd shut me out before I could explain. Snow drifted silently between them. Caleb's shadow disappeared from the doorway. Ethan finally stepped back. I think maybe you should go, before you make this any harder. Her breath hitched, but she nodded. She followed James to the SUV, her boots crunching in the snow. As the taillights disappeared into the night, Ethan stood on the porch, the cold biting through his shirt. All he could think about was how a woman who wasn't supposed to belong here had somehow made herself part of their lives, and how empty the house suddenly felt without her. The skyscrapers of Manhattan glittered against the winter sky, their lights cutting sharp lines into the night. From her corner office at Hayes International, Victoria could see it all. Central Park dusted in snow, yellow cabs weaving through traffic, the city humming with ambition. It was everything she used to love, and now it felt like nothing. Her desk was stacked with reports, acquisition proposals, and a tablet flashing news headlines about her mysterious absence. The first week back had been a blur of board meetings and damage control, each one more exhausting than the last. James called it getting back on the horse. Victoria called it wearing a mask. Late one evening, after everyone had gone, she sat in her office with a cup of untouched coffee. The hum of the city below was constant, but her mind was in Vermont, in the garage with Ethan, in the kitchen helping Caleb with homework, on the dock watching the sun dip behind the hills. She had told herself leaving was the right thing, that she'd been selfish to disrupt their lives. But the truth gnawed at her. The disruption had gone both ways. She had taken pieces of them with her. A knock at the door broke her thoughts. James stepped in. You're still here, he said, glancing at the clock. It's almost midnight. Couldn't sleep, she replied. He studied her. You've been distracted. Ever since Vermont. She tried to smile. Guess small-town life leaves a mark. Victoria, your life is here. The company needs you. She set down her pen. Does it? Or does it just need someone to keep the wheels turning? James exhaled slowly. I know you think you can walk away from this, but you won't last. You'd be bored in a month. Maybe, she said, her voice low. But at least I wouldn't feel like I was disappearing in plain sight. That night, she returned to her penthouse apartment. The view from her floor-to-ceiling windows stretched over the city, but it only reminded her of how far away Havenbrook was. She opened her laptop and found herself typing, Highway 19 Havenbrook, Vermont weather. Snowstorm warnings flashed on the screen. She wondered if Ethan had gotten the generator working this year. She wondered if Caleb was still drawing at the kitchen table after dinner. She wondered if either of them ever thought about her, or if she had been erased as easily as she had erased Anna Miller. The next morning, she sat in the boardroom, surrounded by people discussing market share and Q4 projections. She was nodding at the right times, saying the right words, but inside, she was somewhere else entirely. And with every passing day, the somewhere else was winning. It was nearly 3 months before Victoria found herself driving north on Highway 19 again. The decision hadn't been a lightning bolt. It had been slow, steady erosion. Every board meeting, every cocktail party, every charity gala felt more like theater. She played the role of Victoria Hayes, powerful CEO, while the part of her that had been Anna Miller kept whispering about wood smoke and quiet mornings. When the whispers became a roar she couldn't ignore, she packed a small bag, left James a vague message, and drove out of the city before dawn. The snow along the roadside was thick and untouched, draped over the hills like a quilt. By the time she reached the outskirts of Havenbrook, the familiar landmarks tugged at her chest. The diner with its peeling green paint, the old feed store with the crooked sign, the frozen river where Caleb had once dared her to skip rocks. Her heart hammered as she turned into Ethan's street. His house came into view, the porch light glowing in the early evening. She imagined Caleb running out to greet her, Ethan's guarded smile giving way to something softer. She parked at the curb, hands trembling on the wheel. The front door opened, not because she'd knocked, but because Ethan was already there, stepping out onto the porch in his work jacket. His eyes found hers immediately. No surprise, no smile, just stillness. She got out of the car, crunching over the snow. "Hi," she said, her voice catching. "Hi," he replied flat. I didn't call because I wasn't sure you'd want me to come." He didn't answer, and the silence stretched until she wanted to fill it with everything she'd rehearsed in the car. How she'd missed him, how she'd thought about them every day, how the city had felt like a cage without them. Before she could speak, Caleb came out, tugging on a jacket. When he saw her, he froze mid-step. "Anna," he asked, hope flashing in his eyes. Her breath caught. "It's me, Caleb." But then his expression shifted. "Or is it Victoria?" The way he said it was like a stone in her chest. "I'm still me. I'm still the person who—" "You left," he said simply. And then he stepped off the porch and walked past her toward the sidewalk. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You can't just disappear and expect things to be the same." "I know," she whispered. "But I had to come back. Even if it's too late." He studied her, something unreadable in his eyes. "Why? Because you were lonely in your penthouse? Or because you realized we were convenient?" Her throat ached. "Because I realized you were home." The wind whipped between them, sharp and cold. Finally, Ethan stepped back toward the door. "Caleb's got a game tomorrow," he said. "If you're still in town, you can come watch. But that's all I can promise." He disappeared inside, leaving her on the porch with nothing but the sound of her own heartbeat and the glow of the porch light spilling across the snow. The next day, the high school gym smelled faintly of popcorn and sawdust, its bleachers filled with neighbors in winter coats. Victoria sat near the back, unsure if she belonged there. Caleb spotted her as he jogged onto the court. His face didn't light up, but he didn't look away either. That felt like a start. Ethan arrived late, sliding onto the bench beside her without a word. His jacket brushed her arm, and the nearness made her pulse quicken. The game was scrappy, full of missed shots and clumsy passes, but when Caleb sank a basket, Victoria found herself clapping before anyone else. For a heartbeat, Caleb glanced her way, really looked, and his mouth twitched like he might smile. When the game ended, the crowd trickled out into the brittle winter air. Caleb was mobbed by teammates, so Victoria lingered near the exit. Ethan walked her to the parking lot. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I wanted to." She hesitated. "I don't expect you to trust me again overnight. But I'm not leaving this time. Not unless you tell me to." He stopped beside her car, studying her like he was weighing every moment between them. The laughter, the hurt, the silences. "You know what I hated most," he said finally. "It wasn't that you left. It was that you didn't give me the chance to fight for you." Her breath caught. "I didn't think you'd want to." His voice was quiet, but steady. "You were wrong." For a moment, neither moved. Snowflakes drifted between them, settling on her dark hair, melting on his worn jacket. "I'm not asking for everything back," she said. "Just a chance to prove I can stay." Ethan exhaled slowly. Then, almost reluctantly, he reached for her gloved hand. His fingers closed around hers, rough and warm. "You get one chance," he said. "Don't waste it." The cold around them didn't matter anymore. From across the lot, Caleb called out, "Hey, are you coming or what?" Ethan glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "Guess we are." They walked toward him together, the snow crunching under their boots, the distance between them finally, quietly closing.